We've seen terror cells choose soft targets, such as crowded streets or busy public spaces for recent attacks. This is due in part to the constant challenge of keeping public areas completely secure and evolving terror networks willing to inflict fear and carnage at any cost. Here to weigh in, Ron Hosko, former FBI Assistant Director. Ron, thank you so much, and a friend of the show as well.
My pleasure.
Third attack in the UK in 3 months. One attack is too many. What is the disconnect? What is going wrong?
Well, you know, it is very, very concerning, the numbers of not only victims, but the frequency of attacks in Great Britain. I think that as we learn more about these offenders, I'll be interested to know how many of them had been on law enforcement or intel services radars in the past. We've heard too many times domestically and overseas that these are folks who had been on the law enforcement radar for some reason, were deprioritized, or it's a matter of numbers. It takes me a lot of people to cover a threat around the clock. So I'd want to know, were these people on a radar? Were they high up on that radar? Were they deprioritized? Are there simply not enough resources to cover the threat?
You know, what I was going to ask you is because, you know, what's the ratio of people who are on the radar and people who are hired to monitor these people? Because when you look at an attack like this, as we see this van being pulled apart, there are 7 people whose lives are lost. There are dozens in the hospital. This was done with a van and knives. They had makeshift vests on, but they weren't vests that blew up. It looks as if they were soda cans or something of the sort.
Right. Well, first, it is resource intensive. If you have a high priority target, it can be very resource intensive. Even if I have electronic coverage, I may be listening to your phone calls. I may be able to read your texts. But if you are a homegrown violent extremist bent on doing harm just yourself, there's no network. There's no longer connectivity. There's nobody in Syria or in some other foreign land who's saying attack now and attack in this way. That is much more difficult. And the FBI has spoken for a couple of years now in terms of what's the distance between flash and bang. How much time do I have to intervene between the moment you get inspired and the moment you actually take action? And that's where the FBI is trying to get in front of and get in the middle to do that interdiction. If there's no broader network, if I can't see the broader network and the command and control, that may be just you ticking. And how hard is it to predict your actions, one person?
Within the broader network and within this very intricate web, there are safe havens and there are propaganda. We've talked about propaganda. We've talked about taking the fight online. But those safe havens, do you see that more in the UK? Do you see it more in parts of Europe? Or do you see it here in the United States as well?
I think overseas it is a much larger problem than we have domestically. I think we have better relationships with large Muslim communities here in America. I think that those communities, and particularly leaders within the Muslim faith, seem to have more trust in law enforcement here. They recognize that this is not a battle with all of Islam. This is a battle to ferret out those individuals who want to do great harm, who are not here to integrate. They're here to do harm. And so I think there's a greater degree of trust. That always has to be built upon. In the meantime, I think it would be prudent to look at the law enforcement tools and the guidelines that the FBI and others in law enforcement have to work against, and look at ways to improve. Look at what we've missed, and look no further than the Boston Marathon bombers or by San Bernardino or in Orlando, and say, look, we've had these people on our radar in the past. They've fallen off our radar, or we've deprioritized them, and then they've acted. So what are we doing now that we can do differently, or we have to do differently to protect Americans? And I think there are opportunities there.
I only have about 30 seconds left as we watch these live pictures of this van being towed from the scene of the carnage last night. How important are these past 24 hours and upcoming 24 hours?
I think very important. You know, first, I want to see what did the Brits decide to share with us on this occasion after the purported leak the last time, after Manchester. How broad is that engagement? How trusting are they with current information, intelligence on these subjects? And what can we do in America to learn from it? Secondly, what connectivity did these attackers have with the Manchester attackers or the previous London attackers?
Interesting. Ron, thank you so much for joining us. We'll wait to hear their identities and maybe learn a little bit more about the network they are or are not involved with. We'll soon find out. Thank you so much.
Sure.